I'm going to read a sentence or two from your article. According to Kirk's friend, who also enjoyed access to President Donald Trump and his inner circle, Kirk strongly warned Trump last June against bombing Iran on Israel's behalf. Charlie was the only person who did that, the source said, recalling how Trump, quote, barked at him in response and angrily shut down the conversation. The source believes that the incident confirmed in Kirk's mind that the President of the United States had fallen under the control of a malign foreign power and was leading his own country into a series of disastrous conflicts. Max, when you spoke with us in June, in the middle of the so-called 12-day war, you said to us at that time, and you said elsewhere, that you think that Trump is afraid of Israel. Since then, since the assassination of Charlie Kirk, you've doubled down on that claim. Can you please explain to our audience again why you say that?
Well, first of all, that those lines you read were corroborated days after I reported them by Vice President J.D. Vance, who was seated in Charlie Kirk's chair hosting his show after his death. He said that Charlie Kirk did go to the White House and lobbied against striking Iran. He didn't have the details I had on Trump, but he probably was there, but didn't want to embarrass Trump. But of course, Trump was afraid. Of course, Trump is completely controlled and cowed and cucked by Netanyahu. That's why Netanyahu, according to Tucker Carlson, someone who's much more connected than I am to Trump world, said that Netanyahu is running around the region bragging about controlling uh, Donald Trump. I mean, Netanyahu has said this openly about the US before, or at least he said it in private, and the video was leaked in 2001. He was bragging to a small group of settlers in a sort of and he didn't, I don't think he knew he was being filmed. He said the US is a thing you can move easily. So this is textbook Netanyahu. How does he control Washington? Through AIPAC, they control the Congress. They control media through assets, cutouts like Larry Ellison. They're controlling Trump through Miriam Adelson. They're controlling Marco Rubio through Paul Singer, his largest donor, who is just a neocon representing Israel. Ike Perlmutter, longtime donor to TPUSA, also big donor to Trump. He's another pro Netanyahu donor. Ron Lauder. There are so many of them. Actually, if you're watching this now, you can look up Netanyahu's millionaire and billionaire list, and you can find online a handwritten list of millionaires and billionaires inside the United States that Netanyahu uses personally. He personally wrote this list up to exert control over US politicians. But then there's the assassination factor. Donald Trump has faced two assassination attempts. The trial of one of his would be assassins, Ryan Routh, just wrapped up. And with very little fanfare or media interest, Routh was sentenced to life in prison, tried to stab himself in the neck with a pen before he went to prison. None of his links, direct links to Ukraine, were mentioned. Ryan Routh was recruiting for Ukraine's international brigade in Kiev. He had had meetings with the Helsinki Commission on Capitol Hill. He, I mean, this is strange, and none of it is mentioned today. And we scarcely ever hear about the first assassination attempt, which missed Trump's head by a few millimeters in Pennsylvania. And now there is a third major assassination that took down Trump's top, I would say, like his top activist operating in the field, someone who is on his way, on a trajectory towards running for the presidency, probably would have gone into the Senate or been a governor at some point. And you don't think that Trump is frightened? I mean, the whole 1% right now is frightened of the adventurous violence that's unfolding. Luigi Mangione scared the financial elite. Steve Bannon actually gave a speech or participated in a panel speaking to some Silicon Valley, I think a Silicon Valley audience, or it might have been in Aspen, but I think it was in Silicon Valley. And he basically said this guy, Luigi Mangione, just walked up and killed some healthcare executive, and they're just going to come for you. And MAGA will protect you from them. That's why you need to support Donald Trump, because we will protect the rich from the violence of the left. And so that was their message for months. And then, I mean, they can't even protect their own guy. He's like hunted in public, shot down in the most dramatic way possible. His security team seemed to have no way of preventing it. Imagine a US president angering a figure as powerful as Netanyahu, who commands assassins around the globe. Uh, what would go through your head if you decided to withhold weapons to Israel and adamantly refused any of their lobbying machinations? What would they do? How would they stop you? And what would happen if the weapons stopped coming? For them, it would be existential. They would no longer, they believe they would no longer be able to survive. So I think Donald Trump understands this, but this is also something that I've been told by people who know Trump, who've been close to him. And I've known for years that he believed there would be assassination attempts on him, not necessarily from Israel. So I believe this is in his mind. And I also heard from someone who has very good access into the White House, inside the White House. And I've talked about this for the past week or so. I've been talking about it for like 2 weeks. That during one of Netanyahu's visits to Washington, or possibly during two earlier this year, agents of Israel placed electronic devices on the emergency response vehicles of the Secret Service, which would presumably respond to an attempt on the president's life. And the Secret Service found them. And I thought, this could be crazy, and I should consider whether I'm just being like fed some kind of conjecture, some hearsay. But there's a clear precedent there when in 2019, three former senior US officials who had been Trump officials, one of them might have even been like John Bolton. No, it wasn't Bolton, but three like national security officials went to Politico and said that Israel had placed Stingray devices. These are cell phone surveillance devices in and around the White House to spy on Donald Trump's cell phone communications. The NSA has concluded that Israel is the greatest spying threat to the US. In 2017, British former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, sorry, in his, well, he was British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, in his memoir, wrote that Benjamin Netanyahu had used his personal toilet, and afterwards, his security detail found a listening device placed in the bathroom by Netanyahu personally. And you have to start wondering, based on the Politico report, who could get access to the White House to place Stingray devices. It's not just any random Israeli agent. There are people who get access through Netanyahu or through high-level Israeli visitors. So that's what Donald Trump and any US president are dealing with. And they're all cowed. They all just completely crumble in front of Netanyahu, who is absolutely ruthless. So I started reporting this weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, about these listening devices on the Secret Service vehicles. I was just in New York, and we can talk about this, for the UNGA, the UN General Assembly, and it was the most militarized I've ever seen New York, probably since 9/11, but period. I've been around several UNGAs and I've never seen it that militarized. Like Amnesty International had a meeting and there were snipers on the roof outside. The meeting I was in yesterday was just teeming with security, which we'll talk about. But leading up to the UNGA, the Secret Service found thousands of SIM cards containing spying devices in order to spy on diplomats' phones, as well as listening devices placed around the area. Now, who would have been responsible for that? Could it have been the Israeli government and its leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, who just a week before, speaking to state lawmakers from the US in Jerusalem, said, Israel is inside your phone? Of course, he meant it in a different way, that Israeli technology has revolutionized the cell phone, but there was a strong tinge of irony to his comments, considering how much surveillance he's applying to a government that claims to be Israel's most unshakable ally. Israel's not an ally, it's ruling through manipulation and fear inside the United States. It's exerting power through manipulation and fear inside the United States and inside the Oval Office. And it's surviving through continuous genocide in its own region.